What's up, guys? Welcome to a new episode. Like always, I'm here, Mary is here, Strahinja is here, and Sky is finally back after a long time. Today we've got Deacon Joseph. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Deacon Joseph Frangipani. I serve at the Antiochian Church here in Ellensburg, Washington, in the United States. I'm serving as a deacon for a number of years here,
Hello?
state on the West Coast. House of young people, 20-something-year-olds live with us on our farm where I guide them with
Sorry,
teachings.
you were lagging for like 5-6 seconds, and then the audio picked up again.
It picked up when you said a house. You were talking
Yep.
about the Holy Cross house.
Oh, we have the Holy Cross House here with 20-something-year-olds who live with us and guiding them deeper into the life of the church and community. How's that so far?
That's good.
Okay.
Perfect.
Oh, he lagged again.
Let's wait a second for him to be back.
For the but I'll share more later.
Oh boy.
No worries. So for today's topic, we have Eastern religions. Sky, what do you know about Eastern religions? What would come to your mind at first?
First thing to come to my mind would be like Taoism, Shinto, Buddhism, well, the different variants of Buddhism. There's like this festival like gets put on every year, and it's technically by a religious group called like Feng Shui or something. They're like a religious group, I think. And so like those, when I think Eastern religions, I think those kind of that area. And Confucianism. Those are the only things that I can really name.
Sounds very confusing.
That one, maybe.
That was a bad joke by me.
And then I see Deacon Joseph joined on his phone, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I'm gonna try that. I think I might have less lag on that.
Hey,
Yeah, it's a bit more smoother.
there we go.
Yeah, that's much better.
Perfect.
Good.
So, did you hear a bit of Sky's explanation of Eastern religions?
Yes.
It wasn't much of an explanation. It was only which ones I know
Mentioning.
about. I could barely tell you about, like, the most one that I could probably tell you about is probably Buddhism, but that's about it. That's all I know. It's like the extent. And maybe Confucianism, which is like it's like more of like a philosophy, I guess, that morphed into a religion or something. So yeah.
How would you explain Buddhism, Sky?
I would explain Buddhism in basically a purely, like, I guess, historical fashion from what I know of how it started. It was started by this guy, I believe he was from India. It was like this prince that I guess decided to sit under a tree until he found the meaning of life or something. And then just spread from that. That's the extent of my Buddhism. And that it has, I believe, what's it called? That's like Four Noble Truths or something. Is that like their thing? I think it's like that. Like the noble, they call it the Noble Truths. And yes, that's pretty much my extent of that. So
let's hear from Deacon Joseph. How was his slight introduction into Eastern religions?
Well, I'm getting a picture of what you know. Right. My experience in Buddhism. I don't know how many are familiar with my story, but having practiced Buddhism for 10 years and 10, 11 years, and that was mostly Tibetan Buddhism, right? There's lots of schools underneath the umbrella of Buddhism, and obviously under the umbrella of Hinduism as well. And I practiced Hinduism for about 2 years, but had studied it while I was a Buddhist. on my journey out of Roman Catholicism. But it certainly can be intimidating for a lot of people. The more, like, the deeper you go into it, because what we're receiving here, at least here in the West, at least when I was looking into it, was like a pop culture type stuff. So you go to the grocery store and they have the prayer flags, and the you go to like a Tibetan freedom concert somewhere. You know, you listen to a bunch of music and do a bunch of drugs, and you think you're helping the Tibetans. But it's a lot different than that. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of depth and rigor that comes to clearing the mind, and not only clearing the mind, but searching for something that's outside the grossly material realm, which is what was extremely attractive to me growing up in the culture that well, I don't even feel like I grew up in the culture that we live in now. I don't think any of us did, because it's kind of new. But the last culture that I grew up in, there was no doubt that we were all thirsty for something, and those Eastern religions speak to that.
I see. I like how you mentioned there was like this mainstream popularity of that, because I remember growing up, like in the very early 2000s, as a child, when I watched TV or something else, Buddhism and different kinds of that, like Tibetan Buddhism, was very popular in movies and TV shows. And I remember as a kid, it always looked like cool. Oh, those guys, they all know Kung Fu. So so that was my earliest memory about those things. And still kind of a bit I associate those things with each other.
Well, there's been a lot of stuff coming out here lately with the Dalai Lama. If anyone's been keeping abreast of some of the, you know, unfortunate news that's come out with his interaction with children, let's say, and which is not entirely surprising, but certainly, you know, a lot of our exposure, my exposure to Buddhism, was actually at a Roman Catholic school in Kentucky, of all places, because meditation, which we're all familiar with in one way or another, and yoga, which we've all probably heard of by now, are really recruitment arms for the New Agey stuff. And the New Agey stuff is really a means of bringing our senses and our guard down as Orthodox Christians, and playing into the imaginative faculty, which is a large part of what meditation and yoga play into. So there's some hidden dangers there.
Exactly, there are a lot of dangers in that. For example, Strahinja, do you know what a danger is there with yoga, for example?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't see the point of like doing yoga if you can just stretch just by stretching, you know, you don't need to. The thing with yoga positions is that they often imitate, you know, Eastern religious and Eastern spiritual symbols. Like I'm not really knowledgeable in that, but I guess that the downward dog position is supposed to pay homage or respect to a certain deity, and as well as, you know, some other positions like that. And the danger with that is like, you know, losing your faith and starting to think that you have discovered something new, something cooler in, you know, Eastern spirituality, and it not even being actual Eastern spirituality, it being like some watered down, you know, like New Agey stuff, as you know, Father said here. So I mean, yeah, I think that's the main danger with meditation. Apart from the spiritual danger, is if you go into like esoterical stuff that's not pleasing to God, always there is an exposure there to, you know, attract something evil towards yourself. But apart from that, also like just diluting your religion and getting into, you know, like some Eastern mumbo jumbo, basically, which a lot of people used to like. I'm from Belgrade, and I know that when in the early 2000s, 90s, it was still present, this kind of it was like an Indian inspired cult, and they had like rock bands that were doing the music for that kind of thing, and people could go there and you know, get sucked into that, start giving money to that. It was like kind of a sect, actually, you know. It attracted a lot of people who wasted a lot of time and, you know, did stupid things there. So basically, I mean, I think that's the gateway drug of getting into those things. If you go like head first, I guess, into a lot of these yoga classes, especially the American ones, they are very much into this kind of new age.
Well, there's no accident that here in America during the 1960s there was a revolution that really swept like wildfire, that was instigated by a certain program. I don't know how free we are to talk here, but there was a program here in America that was doing LSD tests on the population, and among those people that were enlisted by the major universities and the military to engage in those LSD tests, one of those was a man named Richard Albert. And Richard Albert and his friend Timothy Leary kickstarted those psychedelic experiments, and then were paid to go and spread LSD through America. And one of them went through the political realm for revolution, and the other one, it went in the spiritual realm. And Richard Albert went to India to go become like a swami or a guru. And he met Neem Karoli Baba, who's a guru in Hardwar, where I went to his tomb in India and met one of those guys there, Krishnadas. And anyway, when Richard Albert came back and changed his name and wrote a book called Be Here Now, that started the new agey hippie do acid and go find your guru movement in America. I mean, that, like, he was the guy, and this was in the 70s, and it was his book that got me into Hinduism a number of years ago. I mean, more than a number of years ago now. So we can see this pattern starting around the 1960s. It was certainly a lot earlier than that. You can actually trace it to Ralph Waldo Emerson and Walt Whitman and the Transcendentalists, who had read copies of the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, but it didn't really hit mainstream, not the way that it did, until LSD and psychedelics came. And as some of us may know, the psychedelics open us up to the astral world, and the astral world being the intermediary world between this one and heaven. It's still created, right? It's still a created realm, but it is a spiritual realm, and that's the realm that's given over to demons. And so there is a connection between the psychedelic use and getting and sort of being exposed to that astral world, and meditation and yoga that does something similar. And that was part of my like gateway into that.
Also for the viewers, Deacon Joseph put in aspect a very interesting topic with the projects that they had in the 60s. I recommend to everybody look a bit into it. There are some very disturbing stories with that. Not only this one, but also some other people that got those that were on those lists with the LSD and that stuff. And
One of them just
tragic
died
story.
in our country.
Hmm.
One of them just died a few days ago.
His name was Ted.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And he really hated airline companies in the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah. Yep.
I
And
mean, yeah,
Charles was one as well, right? If I remember correctly. It's a couple of years since I looked into that project.
Who's
they had
that?
back then. The other one who was in Hollywood killing people, the Charles
Manson
guy.
guy, the guy that kids put on t-shirts.
Oh yeah, no, Charles Manson. I mean, these were, so the MK Ultra thing was like a Jeffrey Epstein scandal of its day, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, the Beatles and the Grateful Dead, they were playing shows distributing the acid for Ken Kesey and all those guys. I mean, not to go down a rabbit hole, but it is connected to Eastern religions, because that was the that was one of the catalysts for this sort of new world, you know, that the religion was going to be one in which your thoughts and your experiences are reality, right? That's what some of this came about. And so if they can control your mind, right, then they can control your personhood as far as they see, right? And Hinduism and yoga, I've seen some young man here in Washington walk into the room, had never met him before, and knew immediately what demon was attached to him. And he turned around and he was introduced as a Hare Krishna. And I was like, oh, it wasn't just a patchouli. I mean, I could tell, I could tell
Yeah.
that there was some cloud over him. And initially, it's all sparkles and gold, and then you see the Jesus prayer a little bit, and it's like the smoke clears.
Like they put on spiritual fireworks, as you say.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Also, a lot of these kind of hippie movements are fundamentally anti-Christian, as far as I know. Like every time I met a person who was interested in that, they were either not openly anti-Christian, but associated to like an anti-Christian author. Like, for example, a very famous author who is like exploring psychedelics, and Hunter Thompson. I think everybody saw that movie, Fear and Loitering in Las Vegas, and he's a writer, and people, intellectuals often like really appreciate his books, but he in reality was connected to like a character named Antoine LaVey, who is a very fervent anti-Christian from Los Angeles, and also a drug user and advocate of, you know, like doing LSD and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, basically that those people are directly opposed to the church and do only harm to us. They do no good, you know, for us and our community. I mean, there is no why did the American government sponsor this to, you know, poison the youth? They chose precisely something that would be destructive to, you know, like our traditional values and what we want to get out of life, basically.
I just wanted to ask one question on could you speak a little bit about yoga and how that plays into a lot of things, Deacon Joseph?
Yeah, I mean, most people feel that yoga is you know, gymnastics, and they're going to go to their little like hot yoga pad somewhere in, you know, downtown LA or Berlin or where, you know, Milan or where, Seattle. But yoga is an you know, an arm of Hinduism. It was the missionary arm of Hinduism, and was seen that way for a long time, since at least the World's Fair in Chicago, I think, by Swami Vivekananda. And yoga is something, there's lots of different types of yoga, right? There's bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga was one school that I was very much involved in. That's like devotional yoga. So that type, you're being more, it's more about emphasizing the relationship between you and one of these Hindu gods or demons. But there's other types of yoga. There's like the intellectual type. There is the type that's more popular right now with like the physical yoga, where you're just using your body to draw up what they call Kundalini. And Kundalini is the sort of the latent created energy, and we have to be very careful about this when we speak about it. It's created energy that rests, they say, at the base of the spine, that just so happens to correlate to the serpent in the Garden of Eden. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to uncoil the serpent and raise it through your different spiritual pressure points until it opens up or unclogs all of these different like spiritual valves inside you. And then when your crown chakra is opened after performing all these different physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional feats, then either you realize that you are God or everything else is God, because there's that quote unquote divine spark. There's a lot of Platonism here, or seemingly. But that Kundalini energy is something that I would like to point out is very similar to the created energy. Again, it's not uncreated. And we want to unify ourselves with the uncreated energy, which comes through the divine Eucharist, through the ascetical life of the church, which does not mean putting yourself into the lotus position, or doing downward dog for 35 hours a week or something. So the yoga, which means yoke, right? It means yoke. So you're harnessing yourself to something. And when you're harnessing yourself to some other created entity or other created energy, that should be sending off all sorts of flags for us Orthodox Christians and others as well, of course. And so getting ourselves, bringing that Kundalini up within us, knowingly or unknowingly. You might be doing all these postures and might be thinking, well, I'm not intentionally getting high, right? Because it looks like a cigar, but you don't know what's wrapped up inside it. And so you start to do that type of stuff, and before you know it, you start moving, and being incited with different passions to a greater and greater degree. And then, you suddenly are finding yourself visited sometimes, God forbid, by some of these entities like I was. Or mentally you start moving in a place that's very unorthodox and very, very concerning, which we can go into if we want to, about how philosophically it's incompatible. It's Pelagianism, essentially, if you're familiar with that heresy.
So, I just had another quick question. Those spiritual pressure points that you said, are those the things they refer to as chakras?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all right, Milos. Those are my questions finished.
All right. So what we can take from the topic of yoga, we all, as Orthodox Christian, we have to stay away from it. First, because the poses are imitating pagan goddesses, deities, and it can attract demons. And also with those other practices that Deacon Joseph has explained to us, it can put us in a trance-like state to even get more contact with demons, and God forbid.
The god of yoga is Shiva. I mean, that's no one's going to argue that in the world of Hinduism. They may argue who or what that means, but you go to India and go to the capital of yoga. It's basically where it was cultivated, deepened, and maybe invented, in Rishikesh, and that's where I studied it. And there's statues, pagan statues to God with offerings of all kinds of things over there, to that, right? And very dangerous.
Exactly. Maybe those people in the West who try to practice yoga, they don't admit that, but in India it's very clear that it's a pagan practice and a big heresy to us. So no Orthodox Christian should do those demonic poses. We always should be aware of those dangers.
And certainly you can
Strahinja, you
stretch
go
for,
ahead. You wanted to say something. I'm sorry.
problem. You can stretch for any sport like football or whatever, in a completely different way. Like, doesn't stop you from like living your life. Just don't do yoga. Like, I really don't see the point of yoga really. And many people say like, oh, I need yoga because I have no other way to exercise. But then there is so many other ways to exercise and accomplish all those things that they're trying to accomplish with yoga, that like I feel like just normal stretching that I used to do after, sport practice for years is now being, less almost forgotten by like Gen Pop in favor of the downward dog for some reason. I don't know, but a lot of people, more and more people here in the West are like going in those yoga studios and doing that instead of like they could accomplish the same thing with like just normal stretches. You can look them up online, like whatever muscle you want to stretch. Chances are there is a no yoga way of doing that.
I mean, it's like the same as saying we're gonna go to a room and there's icons and there's crosses and we're going to follow the Lenten fast, and then we're all going to do prostrations. But don't worry, guys, there's nothing spiritual about this. This is just totally like not Orthodox. This is just something we came up with, right? I mean, it'd be ridiculous, right? It's like, and the trappings are as obvious in Hinduism and yoga as that would be for us to walk into a chapel and see that and right and saying, oh yeah, well I studied it. Where'd you learn prostrations? Oh, Mount Athos. But don't worry, there's nothing spiritual here, right? I mean, to me, after being around it for so long, it's so obvious that somebody is saying something. They're calling it that which it's not, which these days is unfortunately far too common.
So what were the
Um,
dangers that you encountered as you've slowly gotten more and more into it? Like, I know you mentioned meditation and yoga. Like, what kind of demons did that bring about for you? And like, how did you snap out of it, essentially? How did you find Christ again?
Well,
Because I know you were Roman Catholic before.
Yeah, I was Roman Catholic for about 16 years, and then a high school professor got me into self-hypnosis, which is another thing we haven't talked about, but self-hypnosis, and that got me interested in meditation because I looked up self-hypnosis in my grandparents' Encyclopedia Britannica set, and it said see also meditation, and so I started studying meditation more and more. And that opened up some doors into the astral world where I began to see these different sort of like three-dimensional dark beings that were identified by these other Rinpoches and Swamis once I got to India. So it wasn't like, oh, this is just Deacon Joseph going crazy. This was having it verified over and over and over again in these different Sufi communes, Kundalini temples in Portland, Oregon, in Rishikesh and Hardwar in New Delhi. And some of the dangers, I remember the first time that that I sat down, I could sit down and put my hand on somebody's chest, and they would put their hand on mine, and we would close our eyes, and by chanting these Sanskrit syllables, it became like a name has power and meaning. And we know that more than anyone as Orthodox Christians. We take on a saint's name. We say the Lord's name. St. Paul says, I'd rather speak 5 words right in my mind than 5,000 with my mouth. He's speaking with the Jesus prayer. And so words have meaning, and the name of the Lord has meaning, but so do the names of like the dark ones. And by bringing forth those names, they're like calling cards. A mantra is a calling card where you repeat a Sanskrit syllable and it opens up a door. And I remember after being involved in some very, very occult activities in Willamette Valley in Oregon, I uttered one of these key words, so to speak, and immediately, and I was stone sober, I saw like the Om symbol, the sacred syllable or the sacred symbol within Hinduism, and it started to open up these different, like it opened up this door and this vision of mine, and I saw these mountains and I saw Shiva, and I didn't know any of this at the time, by the way. I didn't know who Shiva looked like, but it came to me when I spoke the name. And that was actually the catalyst for me going to India, because I looked up the symbol and I said, well, what is this? And I looked it up, and there it was in the book. And I said, who is this? And I took the picture, and I sat the other one next to it, and I said, that's that picture, that's Shiva. And I said, well, this is obvious. This is calling me to go pursue him. So the and then the counterpart Kali, right, the goddess of death, and meeting people who were devoted to her. Before I knew it, I was in a quicksand, and I found myself in this quicksand, and it was very, very hard to get out. But once I had an out of body, same thing, experience, because I was into astral projection, I was into mandalas, I was into animal sacrifice, forgive me, and tarot readings and all sorts of different things. That sort of life came to an end for me when I had this experience in a yoga temple, and I was standing outside of my body, and I could look at my body, and I knew that I had free will. Like, I believe in free will. I'm not a Calvinist, and so I looked at my body, and I could think, I could speak, I could hear, I could see, and so I knew I wasn't just consciousness. I knew I had individuality. So that told me Buddhism is done, because everything is an illusion for the most part in Buddhism, and so there's no place for human relationship when there's no self, when there's no soul, right? I mean, there's nothing, right? There's no possibility for love. So, and there's no God. So I could stand outside my body and know that I was me and not someone else. So Buddhism went away, but then I also realized something else. And what I realized was that these gods that I had been worshiping, and I was worshiping them, and I knew that these were created beings, that Shiva and Krishna and Hanuman and all these others were like, they were not God himself. And so if I had free will and I could be outside my body, and I could go to Mary and I could trick her to reject love, or trick her into thinking something else is love when it's not, right? That would be evil. So suddenly there's this idea of like, oh, good and evil actually exist. I can compel someone to love, or I can trick them against love. That's good and evil from my mind at that point. And if I could be outside my body, these things can be outside their body. And so now I was wondering, well, I don't know if they're good or evil. I don't know if they're really bringing me towards what's good and what's not. And so I realized I needed to step away for a moment. And when I went up into the Himalayan mountains to the source of the Ganges River, and I took a mantra that I had, and it's like, I can't be Hindu, I can't be Tibetan Buddhist or Zen Buddhist. I sat inside the cave on my 28th birthday and just repeated this mantra, and I was crying because I'd left my girlfriend in my car. I was on the other side of the world. I didn't speak the language. And I realized I still am a doofus. I realized like what a real doofus I am, and how much pain I've incurred in people by doing all of this for 12 years, being involved in this stuff. And some of it I don't want to talk about. None of the stuff that we're exploring, just because of how dangerous that life can be by sucking you away from Christ, and how quickly it can happen. And long story short, forgive me, my mantra to Shiva became the Jesus prayer. And suddenly it went from that mantra, which I have not repeated since that moment, when I was 28 years old, to Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And as soon as I started saying, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner, that is when I met Christ. And when I met Christ in the cave and like saw him and knew he was my father and my maker, and he was both a man and God, that he had existed at one point in history and now exists within all history, in other words, eternity, then I knew it was Christian. But now it's not like once saved, always saved. Now I knew I had to go find a community, and I had to get the heck out of here and fly out of New Delhi and go back home, which I didn't know what home was yet, but I knew home wasn't in India, and I knew it wasn't with Shiva or Krishna anymore. I knew it was with Christ, but that was a journey that would take me, it's going to take me the rest of my life for all of us, because Christ is eternal and we're called to eternally grow in Christ. So, our conversion goes on forever, but it's dynamic. And thank God he lifts us out of sin.
Exactly. Glory to God. I have one question. It's more an assumption, because you've met many Buddhists people who became Buddhists or Hindus and everything. My theory was always why people get attracted to those religions is because they realize they have, without Christ, this emptiness in them, and they try to search it somewhere very far and very out there because they have this sadness in them, and then then they get tricked by those more of those demonic beliefs. And I think a lot of times it's often to stand more out. Would my assumption be somewhat correct? Why so many people, at least in the mid 2000s, got attracted to it?
They're hungry. Yeah, I mean they're absolutely, we're living in a post-Christian world right now, or
Yeah.
culture. And so when you start, I mean the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, as we saw a return to this new agey pre-last, I mean that's a result of materialism. That's the result of buying
Mm.
so much stuff and not really being satisfied. The soul's not satisfied. And so it's so thirsty after being in the desert that it either wants to go back to the slavery of Pharaoh, or it's going to go jump in a river and not know that underneath the river there's all these crocodiles. And you're just say, well, it's at least I'm jumping out of the furnace. I'll do anything to alleviate the sin that I don't even call sin. I don't know. Like I don't have those terminologies. This person might say, but their mind is on fire, and so they're going to go to fentanyl. They're going to go to pornography. They're going to go to Eastern religions. They're going to find anything that gives them an identity and a place that is seemingly elevating them up from the suffering that they are wanting to escape from. But hell is trying to satisfy an itch that will eternally be there, and no matter how many times you try and scratch it, it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And so the atheism, that this like sort of new atheism that we found in sort of post Christian world right now is just a means to an end. Eastern Europe experienced this, it's still mind-boggling to really fathom. You can't. How many Christians were martyred during that period of atheism? But let's be real about it, that the atheism is only a means to an end. You empty the cup and you fill it up with satanic energy. And that's where you get the transhumanism, transgenderism, the kundalini. These are all the same. This is all coming from like the same battery or same school of evil, no doubt. And we can go into that too now or another time on how that there's no personhood, and your body is just another reincarnated body from another one. Then maybe you really are a woman, or maybe you really, you know what I mean? And you're getting into like all this madness, and you're divided against yourself. And right, who wants to be called they, them, right? It's Legion, right? Legion, the right, like the demon of pride. And so these are connected, and it's very unfortunate to see, because we know many people in our own lives, God forbid, even though some of in our parishes, that are so thirsty and hungry for the love of God, but instead we tend to identify ourselves with our sins and those that want to enable us in our sins, and we can become so defensive because we think we are that, but we're not.
By the way, I love that analogy with the first. That reminded me of a thing a few years a friend of mine said. He studied theology in Athens, and he once said to me, You know, I always need my liturgy because after a week, my soul always gets thirsty and it needs its water from the liturgy to drink.
Beautiful.
So that reminded me of that moment because it was, I don't know, that sentence made like a lot of sense for me always. And
Well,
We
it
have like
just,
this. Oh, sorry.
and it just put it 100% in perspective why we need our liturgy, why we need our church, because that's the only thing that can bring out the fullness in our heart, and the only thing where we can get our peace is with God. Only thing we can and ever hope to have. Sorry,
We
go on.
have this. We have this like spiritual hole, right? Where like that's infinite, that only God can fill, right? And people try to fill that with anything, really, uh, other than God. So like sex, drugs, other weird spirituality like yoga, whatever that makes them their own God, really. They
Mm.
worship and um that, you know, as spiritual water from, you know, life-giving water from Christ, Christ himself with the Eucharist, the holy water, the blessed bread, all these things, right?
Hello.
Mary froze.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, my internet went out.
All right, you're back.
And yeah, so like I was saying, we need to fill it with all these things, but it seems like a lot of Far Eastern religions twist our idea of like needing, you know, God, that, you know, to fill us and into something different. Like, you don't need this, you need that, right? Like, you need to meditate, you need to, like, I saw someone basically say that Buddhism is essentially like believing like you become a god or whatever, and then you kind of stop existing. Is that right?
Well, the attraction of Buddhism for many people can be a sense of disassociation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you are taking yourself out of the equation. And Saint Sophrony of blessed memory, who practiced yoga and studied Far Eastern religions for a very long time, makes a wonderful comment in his book on Saint Silouan that yoga and transcendental meditation is transcendental suicide, because the goal is you're trying to kill the self. And when you're trying to kill the soul that can't die, and you keep trying to do that, you end up incurring all manner of psychological problems and spiritual problems, of course, as well, because you can't kill the soul, as we
Like it's
know.
trying to kill the image and likeness of God within us, like destroy it.
Yes, almost wish it out of existence.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. That's what I was kind of, yeah, you basically finished my point. It tried to like completely skew the like our idea of what we need into something so completely off that it just, you know, completely
Well,
destroys us.
a lot of people have wanted to take drugs to expand their consciousness and go, be outside themselves and find another world, right? Well, then meditation and yoga and Eastern religions took that form, or maybe it was vice versa. But you have those two. And then what do you have coming around the corner right now? You have this transhumanism. The transgenderism is just a means to an end. The transhumanism is now, well, the meditation and the yoga, that's not fast enough. That's not scientific enough. The drugs, not fast enough, not clean enough. We'll get you technology. We'll get you the VR goggles. We'll get you the implants. We'll get you the, all the rest of it. Science will be your best friend. And so they're trying to take what the drugs and the meditation and the yoga did, and they're trying to sort of brand it and electrify it and tempt us with all of these sort of like Icarus, right? And like you melt your wings drawing too close to the sun, trying to fly too high, or the Tower of Babel, right? We see it over and over and over again, but they're all the same. I mean, it's all the same.
True. Often history repeats itself, unfortunately. Now, like you said, it's about those new trends and also making we, in this very big materialistic world, the number one worship money, the quick money. That's the most important topic nowadays, unfortunately, for the young people.
Feels like they're turning their, the end goal with all of this is turning the image and likeness of God within us all into the image and likeness of Satan. Right? Like, don't be like who God calls you to be, someone who submits their will to God, but submits like their will to sin, I guess. Like, and become your own image, become trans, become, identify as gay, identify as this thing, right? And make it your whole personality, make this your whole personality, make that's your image and likeness now, right?
Yeah, a big part
Within
of that
you.
is, I think,
I feel
because the long plan, that's again with the 50s and 60s already started. That's also a part why they use that to destroy even further more the traditional family. And
I'm back.
with all of that, so far how they destroyed the traditional family, they can further push a materialistic worldview.
There's a book that should be read by any young person right now. It's The Saint of the Prisons. And that book really tells you what happened and what's happening now, and gives you a wonderful, warm, spiritual like blueprint on how the Jesus prayer and spiritual community is the antidote to this, like the snake's venom that's threatening to get into all of us. Mary said something interesting just a moment ago about, they want you to decrease so that they can increase in you. Well, if you're full, right, if your cup is full of Christ, then there's no place for them to get inside you. So that's really crucial, is that if we spend our time and we put our hearts are full of Christ, our minds are full of Christ, our homes are full of Christ, and all good things, then there's going to be less, it's going to be spiritually airtight, and we'll be okay.
I have a quick
I would have one last question. Because we left off at the story with in the cave when you did the Jesus prayer and you saw Christ, and then you went to New Delhi and tried go back to the US or wherever home is. I think you said it like that. How did you find exactly after that the Orthodox Church?
A friend of mine who I'd been on the occult path with while I was in India, she had, by God's providence, I mean, there's no clear image in my mind of my life before Orthodoxy that I could see the Lord's providence in this, and that when I am in India and I have my experience of Christ in the Himalayan mountains, this friend of mine who was just as, if not more, off the deep end as me in that world, had just so happened to walk through the Whitaker neighborhood in downtown Eugene and walked into a Vesper service. And so she and I had been very, very close for many years. And she heard my story, which was like 4 or 5 hours to go into. And she heard my story, and I she's like, you should come to Eugene, because I was living in another city at the time when I got back. So long story short, a friend of mine brought me into this Vesper service, and when I walked in and I saw the icons and I saw the candles and I saw the lampadas and I heard the music. I mean, I knew it was really dramatic. I knew I was home. And this voice inside of me that was not my voice said, let this be your cave. And that was like the church became my cave. And I saw the icon of Christ on the wall and I said, this is who I saw. Like, they get it, right? Like, other people, it's not just me. The Lord has revealed himself to all Orthodox Christians. He's led St. Paul, he's led you, he's led me, he's led all of us sinners to him. And I saw that. And when I was visiting, when I came back home, I looked up the nearest Orthodox church of where I was, and it was Holy Door Mission in the Dalles in Oregon. And I sent a little email out, and then I got a response, and I went and visited Luke Hartung out there with Uncut Mountain Press, and he and his dear wife of blessed memory, Presbyteria Catherine, loaded me up full of books and icons, and I started my catechism. Not only there, but I flew down to St. Anthony's, had a very, very profound encounter with a holy elder down there, and who taught me many things. And one of the things that this holy Yarenda taught me was that if I wanted to be a monk, what mattered was how I prayed. That's what makes us more into the Lord's image, is by our prayer. I can go, I have a seminary degree, I have all these master's degrees. Like, those pieces of paper don't matter. Your theology comes by your contact with God, and your contact with God comes through direct experience. And that direct experience only happens through prayer and participation in the sacraments of the church. And that's what Yarenda Ephraim taught me, and many other holy fathers out in this neck of the woods here in America. And that's how I gradually came to shed the old way of life. And when I was baptized and chrismated, all of those strings that had attached themselves to me, and they were attached to me, were burned off. It was like spider webs being burnt off in fire. And I came out of the baptismal tank, as all of you have, if you were baptized, a new man. There's still scars, there's still passions. It's not a magic trick. But now we were just celebrating Pentecost last week and All Saints today. Now what we have to apply that medicine and take that medicine and bring it back as a sweet offering. Because I do want to share before we close, if we're closing, that the one sacrifice that I had been running away from, it's what brought me to India, it's what brought me into Buddhism and Hinduism, was I had a broken heart. And I had suffered a broken heart from a very early age, and it traumatized me, and sent me spinning in so many different directions. And I thought that I could pretend it wasn't there, or I could make the best artwork and it would be cathartic enough for that stuff to leave. And then when I became Orthodox and I saw Christ on the cross, and then I saw Christ resurrected at my first Pascha service, not just pretending or not just remembering something that happened historically, but really experiencing Christ's resurrection as he was resurrected at that moment, because Pascha is eternity. Then I understood that the broken and contrite heart that I have, God will honor that sacrifice, like Psalm 50. And so this gift, this was a gift that I had, that you have, that when we have that broken and contrite heart, if we offer that as a sacrifice like Abraham, the Lord will come running like the Father, right? He'll come running and slay the fatted calf and put the ring on our finger, and we will dine with him. And dining with him is partaking of his divine nature, his energies.
That was beautiful. I really
Amen.
like that.
That was, yes, very good.
Also, could I ask for, it's, let's say, for the viewers who might be on a similar path like you have been, and is maybe watching this video right now. Are there any last like arguments and words or any last message that you want to give them?
Pursue Christ. No argument that no one could convince me that my path was dangerous. I had entities coming through my bedroom. I had them standing over me. I was haunted by these different demons. I had gotten sick from the all types of stuff. And what happened to me was relationship. And it was pursuing that relationship of Christ and reading the Way of the Pilgrim and going to an Orthodox liturgy or a Vesper service and standing there and just being. Like, I'm not going to manipulate anyone. I don't want to force anyone from anything, or I'm not going to pull their hand away from it unless they say, help, I'm in a fire, and I'll pull them out. But by our collective prayers on behalf of all and for all, right? So I would end with, if anyone has any questions or they have any concerns, please reach out to a spiritual father, a confessor in the church who's connected to a holy monastery. Visit a monastery. If you have any questions about what we've talked about, or about my path, if I can in any way point someone in those directions into the church, I'm sure my email address can be shared if that's appropriate, and I'd be happy to write or share otherwise, or have another conversation. But really, it's about prayer and getting one of these. And these are, you see in those old movies, and they're putting in those ammunitions in the machine guns, and it's like blasting the enemy. That's what this is. And we pray and we don't give up.
Yeah, that's probably the strongest weapon you can have.
Man, now every time I get a prayer rope, I'm gonna imagine like I'm on D-Day. Like,
Yeah,
Fighting the demons.
I love Saint Paisios's quote on the prayer rope. The prayer rope is your pistol, and the prayer is your bullets. So use it.
It's true. No, it really does. It really does.
Yeah, I felt it too. It's incredible.
All right. Thank you guys for watching, and thank you again, Deacon Joseph, for your time and sharing your knowledge with us. Hopefully we can do in the future another video on this topic, where we maybe go even more in depth about a certain subject of those things. And
Sure.
take care, guys, and God bless.
Thank you. God bless.